And I looked at it, and I swear to God, I said, well, why don't you come in and explain this to me, and I'll make a decision.
Right.
So he came in, and he told me that he had just completed a 6-month training course to become third officer in the Indian Merchant Marine. And his cruise ship had made several ports of call in the United States, and he felt he had been treated very, very nicely by the Americans he met. And he didn't tell me how he met them, and I didn't know, but I accepted that information. And I said, okay, that sounds reasonable. I'll definitely come to your house for dinner tonight. And he introduced me to his mother, who happened to be a very famous Indian dancer and dance teacher who did concerts all over the world, which was very unusual at that time. Okay. And he and I became closer than brothers.
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing.
We are still friends today, 55 years later.
That's incredible.
And I'm hoping sometime next year to be able to go and spend a month or so with him in Pune, which is where he lives.
What a story.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story. You wouldn't believe it if you read it in a novel. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
But it's the reality of what happened to me. Best thing that ever happened was my going to India and him knocking at my door. Ultimately, by the way, he worked his way up to captaining super tankers for 44 years across the oceans.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Amazing, absolutely amazing man.
That's an incredible synchronicity, timing, divine plan story, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, talk about the 60s. We were talking about the 60s, and it's not going to Vietnam, but going to the bitter end, right? Back in New York City.
Oh, back to the bitter end. I got a couple of things about the bitter end I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, we were talking about that because you selected some of the great early folk groups like the Weavers and Peter, Paul, and Mary. And
the bitter end was a place where up-and-coming folk singers and folk groups would perform for free.
Right.
There were two places in the country where they could do that. New York was the bitter end, and in California was the Hungry Eye.
San Francisco.
Some of the biggest names in folk history in the 60s and 70s performed in those two places, and they performed for free. They came and sat at your table. You became friends with them, and it was just a wonderful time to be alive. Bob Dylan was one of the people who came there.
Right.
Okay? And if you remember Bob Dylan started as a folk singer.
Correct.
And it tried to emulate Woody Guthrie with a very rough voice.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and people in the who like folk music were okay with that. And then one day he decided he wanted to do rock and roll music.
Yeah.
And we folkies all jumped on him. And then later on, we got on his bandstand because he was incredibly talented and productive.
Yeah.
A singer-songwriter, amazing man.
Yeah, quite a poet and quite a singer. And, well, now Bitter End is still there, I think. Jade,
the Bitter End is still there, but it's not the same. So, first of all, you have to pay a fee to get in, and the openness of the performer, it ain't the 60s no more.
No.
And maybe that's a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, things change, but it's great to paint that picture of the place then. I mean, I think Joni Mitchell and Joan Baez, the whole group, they were all there, right?
All of it. You name anyone. The only person who came and sang at the bitter end who was monicumly famous at that point in time was a woman named Odetta.
Oh, yes.
Everybody else were newcomers.
Right.
And many of them didn't make it, but all of them who did performed at the bitter end in the 60s. Every one of them.
Such a legacy there. Did you did you go there a lot? I mean, were you living there
every Friday and Saturday? I was there.
Oh,
it was my place to be. Yeah.
Where were you living at that time?
I was living at home with my parents in Flower Hill, Manhasset.
Oh, you were back in Manhasset, but you trekked into Manhattan.
I was back in Manhattan. What? You want to hear my sad story? My sad story? When I graduated from Port High, I was accepted at Alfred University in the marvelous town of Alfred, New York, whose motto song has a line, Alfred, the mother of men, which always sounded funny to me. But, for my first 2.5 years at Alfred, I majored in fraternity and girls. And so towards the end of my beginning of my junior year, they asked me to take a semester break and decide whether I wanted to be a college student. And I went home petrified to tell my dad that I had been asked to take a hiatus. And he said, no problem, Bill. You'll go to summer school and you'll take night classes at Adelphi. You'll take nine credits in the summer, and you'll have your 18 credits. You won't lose anything.
Well, that's not bad.
And you have to understand, I'm 5'8". I used to say 5'9", but a little over 5'8". My dad was 6'3", and okay, Dad, whatever you want.
Yeah, a little intimidating.
So I went to Adelphi, and I took my 9 credits at night, and I took my 9 credits in the summer, and lo and behold, for 18 credits, I ran a B-plus average, putting in no more work effort than I was putting in at Alfred and getting D's.
So you never know.
I have to go back to Alfred. And I lost the year in transferring because they wouldn't accept any grades lower than a C. But that was okay. I got my BA, got an extra year of exemption from the draft, got 2 years of a master's degree, and then joined the Peace Corps and went to India.
Wow.
And by that time, I was past the age of being drafted.
Right.
So that worked out very nicely.
That worked out perfectly. Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your wife, because you were married for 66 years. Is that right?
No, 44 years.
44 years. Sorry, wrong.
We were married for 44 years. She's gone now 6.5 years.
Jane Rapp.
And I never, ever, ever, ever expected to outlive her. And the reason for that is her mother, my mother-in-law, actually lives across the street from me. And will be 102 in March.
Oh, my God. March also, like you.
So I never expected it, but Jane was a smoker and developed lung cancer. And they suggested that she needed to have 2 lobectomies. And the first one went well in Friday, operated Saturday morning, I guess, released on Sunday, healed quickly. And then went in for the second operation and never made it out of the hospital on her own 2 feet. She passed. Blood clots formed at the site of the surgery, went right to her heart, and she was gone. So that was probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life, losing her like that. Because, again, I never expected to outlive her. Never.
And let's talk about the wonderful things that she did. Of course, she was a wonderful person.
She was
the angel of the water.
One of the most amazing people to occupy my life space. For example, and the best example, you can look up by Googling Jane Rapp, Angel of the Water, New York Post.
Yes.
During the blackout after Hurricane Sandy,
we remember it well.
Con Ed plant at 14th Street was inundated with water and had to shut down.
Right.
And we had no electricity. She got the fire department to turn on the hydrant in front of our house.
Right.
And she filled up 2 buckets of water, and then with a flashlight on her head, climbed up 21 stories in almost all the buildings in the neighborhood, bringing water to people who couldn't leave their house and needed water to flush their toilets and cook and wash their hands. And she did that every day during the blackout, almost all day long.
That's incredible.
Skinny little 97-pound weakling.
And
she was filling a bucket of water at a point in time when a writer for the Post saw her and said, "What are you doing?" And she said to him, "Well, I live on the 5th floor. Follow me up the stairs, and I'll make you a cup of coffee, and I'll explain it to you." And he did. Okay?
Wow.
He followed her up 5 flights. She made him coffee, had a candle on the table, and explained to him. And then he wrote a 3/4-page story about what she was doing.
Yes, I
and
saw it.
and that was syndicated across the entire country, and people sent her money from all over the country, which she donated to various causes.
Amazing.
Enough.
Now, where did you meet? Where did you two meet?
That's another interesting story.
I'm sure.
Where did we meet? I will go back in history, and not go to the deep, dark part of the history. At some point, I decided to become a teacher, and was accepted at Teachers College into a doctoral program.
Oh.
Yeah, I still have 9 credits towards my doctorate if I ever want to go back.
You might. You might.
I might.
Yes.
I had my first meeting with my faculty advisor for my doctorate, and he was going through my paperwork, and he looked at my paperwork as if he was looking at it for the very first time. And I love telling this story because it's so stupid of him. And he said, "Mr. Rapp, you have to understand, I already had an MBA at that point." Right. He said, I looking at your paperwork, I have no doubt you'll be able to get your doctorate, but there's a problem. And I said, "Problem?" And I pointed to myself. No, not you. But in order to work in education anywhere in this country, you have to be credited. Okay? And in order to be credited, you have to have student teaching.
Okay.
You have no student teaching.
Well, how could you have had student teaching? You weren't in the program yet.
Well, exactly. And he never said the words that would have made a difference, and I didn't understand that at the time.
Yeah.
And I was heartbroken. I had given up, believe it or not, a rent-controlled, enormous studio apartment on 27th Street and 6th Avenue, moved into a closet-sized room in a dormitory at Teachers College.
Right.
Okay, so I could afford the year for my master's.
Right.
And now what am I going to do? So I'm wandering the halls for a few days, and I bumped into a 1-year, 12-month program of teacher ed that included student teaching. And I said to the head of that program, "This is my sad story, and I need to be in your program." And he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Rapp, that's the worst reason I ever heard to accept someone into my master's program. However, since you've already been accepted into a doctoral program, I can't deny you admission into my master's program."
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, and I did his master's program. I got my MA. I did my student teaching. While I was getting my MA, one of the faculty assistants in the program had a connection to a parochial school on Lexington Avenue and I can't remember the street.
That's okay.
72nd and Lex. Okay. Actually, the school was on 73rd. And he introduced me to the principal of the school, who I advised her right at the beginning of our interview that I'm Jewish. And she said, "That's not a problem, even though this is a parochial school." And not only did she hire me, she introduced me to a woman who owned an apartment building across Lexington Avenue, who gave me an apartment immediately because I was going to be teaching at the parochial school.
Fabulous.
So I could just kind of fall out of bed and be in my classroom. And of the 32 children in that classroom, only one family was upset that their daughter was going to be taught by a Jew. And they removed her from that school and enrolled her in the elementary school a block away that had like 86% Jewish teachers. It was kind of ridiculous, but I guess it saved them the tuition.
Oh my gosh. That's
true story. And so where were we going with that?
We're going with how you met Jay.
Yeah. So I get a call from